episode 138. I'm Ket, and today we have some things to discuss. This is normally the time of year that I do what I call the BG report, where we just do a full breakdown of the current state of BGs. All the good strategies, the bad strategies, the classes that are doing well, the classes that are doing bad, why they're doing well, why they're doing bad. We get all into it. We dig deep, and it's a full assessment. I always really look forward to it. It's a really fun episode. This year, I think we're going to have to postpone it, or maybe just skip it and pick it back up next year, just because there's a few things. Battlegrounds, it's a new situation. Update 44 is here, and it's two teams instead of three teams. We have 4v4s, we have 8v8s. It's a completely different situation now, and this patch is like 6 weeks old on PC right now, and I still don't feel like I have a really good firm grasp on things. I really don't feel qualified to speak authoritatively on the current state of battlegrounds. And that could be different. Like maybe I would be at a point where I could draw some conclusions right now, but there are a few things that kind of are making it even more difficult aside from just battlegrounds being different now. Um, one thing is update 44 has actually proven to be a pretty unpopular patch with the established battlegrounds community, the people that have been here a long time and have been playing battlegrounds day after day for years up to this point. A lot of those people are unhappy with this update, and they're just not playing ESO right now. They're playing Throne and Liberty, they're playing New World, or they're just doing other things. So a lot of those players that would really challenge you and really make you have to reassess your build and your play style and your approach and all that stuff. Those players just kind of aren't here right now. Another thing that kind of compounds that is, and it's kind of a good thing, I mean, it's really a good thing. The transmute rewards have been majorly increased for battlegrounds. Maybe the best transmute grind in the game. At the very least, it's one of them. And I think a result of that is a lot more people that don't normally play battlegrounds are queuing up now to get in on those transmute rewards. So it's a lot more kind of casual crowd queuing up. It's funny, the population is actually really good in battlegrounds right now. It's just inexperienced players is the vast majority of what you run across in there. So we have a situation where all of our veteran players are unhappy with the patch and they're not playing. And then all these kind of casual players are queuing up all of a sudden to get in on those great rewards. And so it's just a very casual environment for the handful of, kind of battlegrounds regulars that are still hanging around. We're all kind of at a consensus, like it's lambs to the slaughter out there. And I have a realistic idea of my own skill level. I think I'm somewhat above average. But lately I feel unstoppable. I mean, I just feel like um unstoppable. And I know it's just because the things I'm talking about here. Another thing that also compounds that even further is the fact that MMR resets at the beginning of every month. So, the few veteran players that are still around, they're basically being kept separated because we're just getting mixed in with the low MMR players because everyone has 0 MMR to start with. And by the time we've gained enough MMR to start seeing each other in our matches, and the matches are actually starting to get good, the MMR resets again. When we're back in there with all the noobs all over again. And that can be fun for a little while. I mean, of course, it's fun getting a 20-0 scoreboard, of course, but it gets old after a while. You start to realize those are hollow victories a lot of the time, and you'd really rather go up against people who are in a similar ballpark skill wise. And it's just kind of rare to find those kinds of matches here lately. And the group queue is even worse. Like just last night, shout out to Maddie Quinn, Ironworks, Sudica. We all squatted up, and it was Saturday night, and we're like, hey, let's do some competitive 4v4 pre-made action. And I mean, just like baby bunny rabbits is all we found. And we've gone up against real teams. We know where we stand. So I'm not, I'm not trying to say anything, but other than the only other teams, quote unquote, that are queuing up right now are extremely casual PvPers. So there's not a lot of challenge to be found as a like a dedicated battlegrounds player at the moment. I'm thinking maybe after some time passes, maybe some of these veteran players will start making their way back. 'Cause it's really not so bad. Like the update 44 stuff, once they work the bugs and stuff out, which I'm sure they will, you kind of get used to this new situation, and there are good things about it. I'm hoping maybe some of these veteran players will realize that and make their way back eventually. We also might be at the beginning of a sort of changing of the guard, where there's all these casuals queuing up to get in on those transmute rewards. And I'm sure a certain percentage of those will kind of be converted into PvP mains. They're in there in battlegrounds. Some of them are going to experience a bit of success and get a thrill off of that and keep with it and start actually making PvP builds and getting better. So it might be a situation where 6 months from now we see a whole new landscape with a whole bunch of new names that are sort of dominating the scene. I can certainly see that possibly happening. Um, so yeah, it's hard to give like a proper like ranked breakdown of like how the different classes are doing and who's better than who at what. But I can kind of touch on things a little bit here. I think Arcanist and Warden seem to generally be the most valuable classes to have around, and especially in 8v8s. Arcanists and Wardens are particularly good in like group gameplay, and they do really well on that. Warden has all that support, and they can build in such a way where they're providing all the support while producing a ton of AoE pressure, and they're just generally kind of a carry all the time. Arcanists are just kind of a juggernaut. They can bring a ton of AoE pressure in a way that really nobody else is capable of, while being very survivable at the same time. So to me, those seem like the two most valuable players. Nightblades and sorcerers, I think, are probably the most popular. Like always, they're both classes are in a great spot in general. I think sorcerers take a little bit of a hit because because of the fact that there isn't a third team. Sorcerers were so great at stealing kills and third partying and kind of playing that kind of gameplay. And when there's only one other team, it's a lot harder to do that because their attention is just straight directly on you the whole time. So Sorks kind of get they're kind of under the gun a lot more than what they're used to in battlegrounds, I think, but they're still doing well. I mean, they still have streak, they still have they're really great toolkit all around. So they're doing fine. But yeah, Nightblades and Sorks definitely the two that I'm seeing the most of. Nightblades in excellent shape. They have been for a very, very long time. This patch in general to me seems like a little bit of a buff to Dragon Knights, especially in the 8v8 queue, just because there's just a higher likelihood that you're going to have a fair amount of support on a team. A lot of cross heals, maybe even a dedicated healer or two. And, Dragon Knights, just because some of the passives that they have and stuff, they majorly benefit from having a bit of support. They can go from being completely ineffective in a battleground to being the most valuable player on the entire map simply because they have a little bit of support, to make them super powered. I think Templar's pretty much in the same spot they've always been. They're kind of in the middle of the road. They're a jack of all trades. They're a pretty good teammate to have. They're very very tanky. They can be a very good kind of frontline brawler, kind of DPS support kind of build. You see a lot of them building to be very tanky, very healy. They want to stand on flags and that kind of stuff. But they can have damage as well. I've had quite a bit of fun on my range plar. If we're what there's 7 different classes, just spitballing, I'd probably put Templar, like, around number 4 or something overall for Battlegrounds. We're just kinda right in the middle of the road there. And then, of course, there's Necromancer, and I think they're basically in the same spot they've been for years now. I mean, I know update 43, they got some, so-called buffs. I don't think we can even really call them buffs. They're just kinda like quality of life things. So you can slot your spirit Arcanist now, or your skeletal Arcanist now. You can slot your tether now and get those kind of basic buffs that those provide. But you're not any more powerful than you were before. You know, those were buffs that you already had to have in your build anyway. So necromancers already had those, and it's not like these are attached to to abilities that are overpowered or really really good. You know, in the case of the tether, you know, most arcanists would rather not have to use that ability. You know, like now if we're going to put our major crit buff on blast bones, an ability that we're already happy to use, now we're talking. You know, and that's the thing, is that's what a lot of other classes have going on for them. Like, look at Dragon Knights, they have Flames of Oblivion on its own, an amazing ability that gives you your major crit buff. Nightblades, Invisibility, that gives them their major crit buff while slotted on both bars. You know, like, those are skills that those classes are highly likely to slot anyway, and it's just ultra mega convenient that one of these, you know, essentially required buffs are attached to those things. Templar, their major damage buff is attached to jabs. You know, lots of examples. That's the problem Necro's facing here is like this, you know, giving those buffs to those particular abilities isn't making Necromancer any more powerful. And it's not, you know, it's not a situation like I'm saying there. Like those aren't necessarily abilities that Necros are really itching to slot anyway. You know, so it's like they can slot them, but there's not a, you know, like what's the benefit to having the skeletal arcanist slotted over degeneration, the Mage's Guild ability? So I know we've had the Necro talk lots of times. It seemed like there for a minute when update 43 hit, you know, just because some stuff had happened with necromancers. Some people were picking up their necros and queuing up. And I actually have seen some fairly decent necro builds, but it's like it's like a gear build, you know, it's like the gear is why the build is good. Like you could put that exact same gear on an arcanist and it'd be way better, you know, or a warden. It's nothing that the necro in particular is bringing to the table that makes them, you know, worth bringing versus any other class. Yeah, and like, you know, it's not like you can't make a great necro build. Of course you can, but like what kind of build can you make with a necromancer that wouldn't be better on another class? Really can't think of, maybe bombers, maybe, but I don't know. Nightblades and arcanists are incredible bombers also, so I don't know. Anyway, alrighty, this is more than I had plans to talk about the state of battlegrounds. Like I said, this is not a proper BG report. This is just the time of year that we would normally do that. So thought we would just have a little mini chat there. So in lieu of the BG report, it is the end of 2024, and I thought we could just do a year in review discussion here. Where we just kind of talk about what has happened in the game, patch by patch, in the year 2024. So let's do that. Let's get into that. So starting with March 11th, this was the first quarter patch, update 41, Scions of Athelia. It was a dungeon pack, like a typical first quarter update. So we got the Oathsworn Pit and Bedlam Vale, both pretty forgettable dungeons, in my opinion, honestly. But got some pretty good sets with this patch. Blind Path Induction is a popular set amongst like Shielder support builds. Tarnished Nightmare, of course, dominated the meta for like 3 patches straight. Anthemyr's Construct, that monster set where you throw the axe and then you can go pick it up. A very popular monster set for gankers. I've definitely been ganked with it more than a few times. Oak Father's Retribution, this is one that, I'm actually a huge fan of this set. It's one that I was expecting to be a lot more popular than it is, but it really isn't. Like, you know, I don't see a lot of buzz about this set. I don't see a lot of people talking about it a lot, but it is kind of quietly this very amazing, just sort of stat-based damage set. Now, I always love it when sets like that are added to the game where, you know, it's not playing the game for you. It's not, you know, it's not necessarily a proc set. You know, but it is giving you a lot of damage as long as you know how to use it and what to do with it. So a big fan of that set, and this is also the patch where we got the torque of the last Alien King, the mythic that still haunts me in my dreams. I mean I never did finish farming for all the leads, but it's a pretty impactful mythic. I think I've ran into a few people that have Alien King builds and they're strong. I've dueled people in Stormhaven that's what their build is, and seems good. Seems really good. I hope to try it for myself someday. Would be nice. As far as combat and balance changes that were made in update 41, that this was the status effect patch. That's when all the status effects were sort of reworked and given more kind of particular secondary effects and things like that. Ever since then, already status effects were fairly popular before that, but ever since then, status builds have been an incredibly effective way to do a lot of damage, especially in the dueling space. This is also the patch where Necros got the self blast bones thing, the Grave Lord's sacrifice, that I don't ever see anyone use. I'm glad that they were kind of trying different things with Necromancer, but that one to me seems like a bit of a whiff. They need to maybe rethink that one. It's also the patch where Nightblades got their siphoning attacks changed, where basically you just don't ever have to cast that ability unless you want to. You still can, but a huge buff to siphoning attacks. And basically, Nightblades have zero buff management now. That was kind of the last one, the last timer that they kind of had to keep up with. And so, very easy to play a Nightblade these days. Which used to it's like the opposite of how it used to be. They used to be one of the harder classes to play, I think. It's also the patch where sorcerers had their encase ability changed, so now it's called Shattering Spines or Vibrant Shroud, depending on the morph. And Vibrant Shroud is the AOE burst heal. Shattering Spines is still the exact same ability that it was. It's an AOE root, but they changed a bit, like how the damage is applied and that sort of stuff. But it's still essentially the same as it was. But, it was exciting that Sorks finally have this option to have an instant, class burst heal, but then, Hardened Ward was also Omega buff. This was the Hardened Ward buff. It now has a heal attached to it, as well as a damage shield. And so no Sork really sees the need in slotting Vibrant Shroud when Hardened Ward is, as good as it is. And it's even been nerfed a little bit since then, but it doesn't really seem to matter. Still pretty darn strong. This is also the patch where Master's Dual Wield finally got its long overdue nerf. So its damage is essentially based on your offensive stats like other proc sets are, which is good. You don't see it nearly as often, but you do see it once in a while. That's kind of what you want in a proc set. So that was update 41, the first quarter update, and then in the second quarter, update 42, this is the big paid expansion, Gold Road, or they call it a chapter instead of an expansion, but so this on PC released June 3rd. Of course, there was the content itself, the big zone, there's a trial, all that stuff, which I thought, they pretty well knocked it out of the park. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Most people I talk to seem to enjoy the story and all that stuff pretty well. The new Ethelia, the new Daedric Prince, super cool, I thought. But the big thing was scribing. They finally added spell crafting to the game. They called it scribing. And I gotta hand it to Zos here. I think they really nailed the implementation of this thing. And anyone who's been playing this game for a while, anytime the subject of spell crafting comes up, it's always the same stuff that people say that there's no way they could ever add it to the game because it would be an absolute balancing nightmare. And they demonstrated a spell crafting system back in 2015. They gave I think it was at a QuakeCon convention or something like that, but they gave a whole demo and this is going to be put into the game and it's going to be awesome and all this stuff. And then they never talked about it again, and it never happened. And everyone's assumption was, well, they realized that they could never properly balance it, and it would just completely destroy the PvP meta and everything else. I think maybe that was true until our good friend spreadsheet balancing entered the picture. And and you've heard me and lots of other people talk about how we're not a fan of spreadsheet balancing, how the standardization of all skills, how like every every range spammable does about the same amount of damage. Every dot does about the same amount of damage, and so on. That is something that I feel like was a bad move, and that was a bad direction to go for things. And I still to this day wish we could go back and undo that. But one very positive thing about that is I think that it makes spellcrafting possible. It makes scribing possible. Because now we don't have to worry about it being a balancing nightmare. If you want to scribe yourself a ranged spammable, well, as long as it fits on the spreadsheet, as long as it's dealing the same amount of damage as other ranged spammables, and the secondary effects are, in alignment as well. The fact that they have standardized all these categories of skills means that okay, it is actually pretty easy to balance a spell crafting system now, since we do have these standards. So I think that was a concern for a long time. It's like, oh, we could never have spell crafting because we could never balance it properly, is what players have said. But as bad as the skill standardization has been for the game, in my opinion, this is a major upside from it. Is we can actually have this system, and it was implemented really well. Like I remember myself, I was predicting this to be hugely disruptive to the meta, to the game, and I was saying things like we're not even going to know what game we're playing. Like it's just going to be topsy turvy, and surprisingly, that has not been the case. But at the same time, it has been impactful, and there are good reasons to have scribing and to use scribing and all that stuff. They really did nail the implementation. I mean, plain and simple. Nice job. And they're still tweaking it, they're still kind of messing with the different scripts and things like that, and still dialing it in even better and better every patch. So, honestly, I couldn't be more impressed with how well they've done that. And credit where it's due. I think this is 2 years in a row that they've been killing it. Last year with Necrom, we got the Arcanist class, and same thing. I was expecting that to be massively disruptive to the PvP meta, and we're gonna have to like reassess everything, and that really wasn't the case. Arcanist was dropped right into the game, and they're impactful, they're powerful, they're worth spending the money on and playing, but they didn't completely destroy the meta. They didn't like totally turn the game on its head. If you don't want to pay for the expansion and play with an Arcanist, you can still make a very competitive build with any number of other classes. Again, they just nailed that implementation just right. And they were maybe like a little overtuned at first. You would expect a new class to be. But even in that regard, like they didn't overdo it. Like it was only just a little overpowered, and, just enough to be enticing. And now since then they've dialed them back and they're kind of more in alignment with everyone else, but still very good, still very strong class. I've been pretty impressed with the last two chapters and the content wise too. Both last year and this year, the content itself for the chapters has been really good. No real impactful sets to speak of for the Gold Road update. I don't think. I mean, maybe a handful of sets that people actually use, but nothing that has really defined the PvP meta. I don't think. This is also where we got skill styles, which I think has been really cool. I mean, it's just like a reskin. They're just like changing the color of existing skills, but I really like that. It's such a simple thing. Seems like something that I don't know, like they were implemented only this year, but already it seems like something that's been in the game for a really long time. So, and they're already like rolling out more different variations. Like I think Force Pulse has two different possible skill styles you can choose from. So I imagine eventually at some point down the future there'll be a whole bunch of different ones to choose from. I think that'll be awesome. And some of them are not just a change in color. Some of them are actually like they're adding particle effects and things like make it look like a totally different ability. So I think they'll probably get pretty inventive with a lot of it. They'll have to be careful though, because this game, the way it communicates like combat cues and stuff, a lot of it's very visual. You see someone hits you with something and you see a bunch of lava spilling out of your chest. You're probably thinking like, oh crap, there's some sort of like burning effect on me right now, but actually it's just a visual thing. I don't know. That's kind of dangerous territory right there. It's also the patch where we got the Saint and Seducer mythic. Very awesome mythic. That's one they definitely tossed us a bone with that one. Super easy to get, very, very powerful. No penalty, like it's not like taking away your block or anything like that. No proc condition other than just being in combat. It's just a brain dead mythic to use, super duper powerful. Takes you like half an hour, if that, to get all the leads for it. So definitely one that seems like maybe they were trying to make up for that Alien King situation. No major combat and balance changes for that patch to speak of. So yeah, we just got the content itself, scribing, skill styles, that Satan Seducer mythic. Those are kind of the big things. In general, a very good chapter. I really liked it a lot. And like I said, 2 years in a row that they've pretty well knocked it out of the park with the chapter itself and the big new feature that comes with the chapter. Nice job. Nice job. So then that brings us to update 43. This was on August 19th for PC. This was just a base game patch. So there's no name for this, no content that was really released, other than we did get some updates to the Infinite Archive, some new kind of rooms in there, and a few other additions to that. But otherwise, no real new content. This was a funny one because they sort of I don't want to say marketed because it wasn't really marketed, but they in a live stream they said that this was going to be a housing focused update. And I think a lot of us just sort of ran with that, because looking back, you don't really see a lot. Like that's why I'm saying it wasn't really marketing material, because you don't really see a lot of them really like pushing this idea of it being a big housing thing. It was just like something they said on a live stream, and there was like a graphical image on the screen that kind of had those words on there that was a housing focused update. And so we got this idea like, okay, there's going to be some big new housing feature in the third quarter. And then the update hit and we saw that it was this home tours feature, which actually isn't a housing feature at all. It's an activity finder feature. So now you can use the activity finder to basically browse other people's houses, like exemplary houses that are kind of being featured or whatever. But there's nothing like once you're inside of a house, there's nothing new to do. The housing limit, the item limit has not been increased. There's no like house like furnishing bag, no new actual housing features other than you have a way to go and browse people's houses. From like people who are like housing enthusiasts that I've talked to, this is apparently a functionality that already existed with the use of an add-on. You could already kind of do this if this was your thing. So it's just kind of funny, that we were all hyping this up to be a housing focused update, and it really was just kind of nothing at all. But I will say there have been a few people in the Stoons Goons Guild shout out that have had their houses featured on the home tours page, and seems like they feel pretty prideful about it, and it's something that made them feel good. So, maybe there was a little bit of value there. But at the time when they were revealing like what this feature was, it seemed like pretty laughable. There were a couple. Oh yeah, this was a patch. They added a second wave of class sets to the Infinite Archive. That's another thing they added there. Notably, Pyrebrand, the Dragon Knight set, incredibly overpowered when it was released. Still very strong. Still compared to other proc sets, stronger than most. Even after it's been nerfed. The Warden one, Ares Cry, I think that's one I don't see talked about a whole lot, but that's also a very good one. And I've ran across a handful of builds using that set that are formidable. Definitely one worth looking at. There were a handful of fairly impactful combat and balance changes on this update. The Arcanist, the Flail, the Stamina Tentacle no longer has execute scaling as of this update. This is the one where Necromancer got all their stuff. So the Shocking Siphon, the damage tether now gives you your major crit buff. The Skeletal Mage now gives you your major damage buff. And your armor buff now gives you minor resolve, which is kind of handy. You already get that from Vigor if you're using that, but still pretty handy. So yeah, like what I was talking about earlier, these are nice things for necromancers to have, but like especially in the case of the tether, putting a major crit buff on an ability that Necromancers don't enjoy using. They really would rather not have to use this ability. If we could put that major crit buff on, say, Blast Bones or something that Necros actually want to use, all the other classes kind of get to enjoy that kind of convenience to a degree, but Necros really they don't. They kind of have to sacrifice bar slots to get these essential things into the build. Even still, even after this sort of quality of life update they have. I do like that the armor buff gives minor resolve because that gives you the option to not use resolving vigor and you can put something else in that spot and still have good buff coverage. That's a good one. That's a very good thing. Still a long way to go for necromancers. This was a patch where they changed Sorcerer's Haunting Curse so that its explosion hits in an AoE now. So they have a really nice kind of like AoE bomb situation in their standard combo. This is also the patch where the Warden's Piercing Cold passive was changed. So it's no more, you no longer get an extra 12% increase to all damage done when you're holding a Frost Staff. They changed that. Now it's that thing where, like, it's a 30k health threshold. And if you're over that, you get what? Blocking mitigation. And if you're under that, you get extra damage. So basically, everybody just gets the block mitigation. Let's see, they changed structured entropy so that it no longer reveals invisible enemies on this patch. This is also the patch where they changed the vampire undeath passive. So now it maxes out at 15% damage mitigation when you're low on health rather than the 30% that it was before. So just a straight nerf. Needed to happen. Definitely needed to happen. And you definitely see it now. Like vampire no longer is like a mandatory thing you need to have on every PvP build. I see, some people still use it, some people don't. It's kind of a pretty healthy mix. So that makes me think like this 15% number is probably about where it needs to be. And then for scribing on this update, they added a bunch of, I think to basically every grimoire, they made your major crit buff and your major damage buff as available scripts for every single grimoire, which I think is really nice. So that was update 43 base game patch, and then we have update 44 base game patch, and that's where we are right now. Dropped October 28th on PC, and this was the Battlegrounds rework, right? So we have two teams now instead of three. There's a 4v4 queue, there's an 8v8 queue, and there's a solo and group queue of each. I kind of gave my thoughts on the battleground situation up at the top of the show. Um, I do prefer the old three-team system. I would like to take us back to that if we could, but I'm also managing to find the fun in this situation too, and I'm just trying to really accept it for what it is and just kind of get on with it, and a lot of positive things to be found with this update, although I will say it's been pretty unpopular with the PvP crowd in general. And I think there are some things they could do to mitigate that. One is just fix the bugs. The bugs with lobbies not filling up and games not starting. It's still pretty bad even now. And they've worked on it. There've been a couple of maintenance patches, and it seems like it's better, I guess, than it was at first. But especially in the group queue, like when you're grouping up with friends, there's a very high likelihood that you're going to get some games that just never fill up and they never start, and you just have to sit there and wait for the timer to run out. It's really frustrating. And there's other things that are frustrating about this new system, but it's like it's hard to even give it a chance when or you're just frustrated with the technical aspects of just getting a game to start. I feel like a lot of people would be a lot more willing to just sort of give the situation a chance if it all just worked right. So they're kind of in a hard situation, I think, until the technical stuff is figured out. I think they're just gonna be receiving a lot of criticism about the new battleground situation. There were some balance changes in addition to that, though. This is the patch where Dragon Knights got the change to cauterize. It's super overpowered now. It hits every 3 seconds. It hits four targets at a time. That's the other morph of Flames of Oblivion, the healing morph. So it hits four targets every 3 seconds. Super great ability, and that combined with scribing, you can actually make a pretty great DK healer now if you want to. I've been kind of toying around with that a little bit lately. It's actually pretty fun. Nightblade cloak was changed to just be a toggle now rather than a 3 second thing. Sorcerer's Hardened Ward was slightly nerfed this patch, so now it heals for 10% of your max health or magicka rather than 15%. They added a new scribing grimoire, the banner bearer. They did add some new sets, but none really worth mentioning. None of them are really being used or anything like that. Azure Blight was basically trashed this patch. Tarnished Nightmare basically trashed this patch. So that was my entire Arcanist build gone. And then Gossamer. I don't see a lot of people talking about this, but I really like Gossamer. It was buffed. It has a 4 second duration for major evasion rather than a 1 second duration. Makes it a lot more usable. Basically, any heal over time ability is going to be, like or regeneration will be just fine to use Gossamer. So yeah, those are the highlights for the stuff that happened, patch to patch this year. I think it's kind of tough to give a fair assessment right now because I think update 44 has left a bad taste in a lot of the battlegrounds community's mouth. I'm kind of just now getting over it. I was not super stoked about update 44 at first, and I'm just now starting to come around and snap out of it and just be like, you know what? There's still a lot of fun to be had here. I think if we can ignore update 44 and just kind of get that out of our minds, this has been a pretty good year for ESO. The Gold Road, a hugely successful chapter. We have to keep in mind this is the second year in a row that they're going for this new sort of release cadence where, the first quarter is still a dungeon pack. The second quarter is still the big chapter, but then the second half of the year is a lot lighter on the content. And those are free base game updates. No ESO plus required, no purchase required. Everybody has access to all that stuff. So it's kind of a situation where if you have ESO plus, you kind of have to reassess and see if you is it worth your $15 a month still or not? Because it used to be, you're getting these third and fourth quarter releases that are worth money, and now that's not part of the package anymore. So I do think it's on the individual player to reassess if they think it's worth, those dollars or not. For me, I think so. For me, it is because I'm getting the craft bag and a lot of other benefits as well. So scrollingpodcast at gmail.com is the email address if you'd like to send me an email. I would love to receive it and read it. I have one email today from John E. Danger. John says, "Hey Ket, thanks for the overview of the new format for Battlegrounds. It was great to hear your thoughts and to have some new content to listen to during my day." John says, "I don't have much hope they'll go back to 4v4v4, but I do believe it was a more balanced format for the reasons you outlined last episode. We'll have to see what they do, I suppose, but 4v4 needs a lot of adjustment. Group or solo, you're either completely rolling the other team or dominating to the point of boredom. Or you're having a frustrating experience of dying consistently with no hope of doing anything less than a 4v1 within 30 seconds. There's not a lot of in between. One of the things I'm curious to know is if you've adjusted any of your builds for the new format. I personally have, and I've started to make some small changes to try to fit in a set or a skill that provides a benefit to others, considering the fights now tend to take place with multiple opponents and allies in the same space. I wonder if that's been something you all on PCNA have noticed as well. Thanks for again for doing this podcast for all of us, and I hope you have a great holiday season, John E. Danger. So, my builds haven't really changed a whole lot so far, I think for a couple of reasons. One is, like I was saying earlier, the atmosphere is just a lot more casual lately. So I haven't felt a lot of pressure to make changes to my build. In the past, most of the time when I go to the drawing board to make changes to my builds, it's because I've had an experience that is forcing me to do that. I've played a battleground, I've come up across a player or multiple players that have forced me to reconsider some build decisions of some kind. And I'm just not running into those situations now. I might run into situations where I'm outnumbered and I'll get rolled, and that's, I guess, can be challenging. But for me, I don't really see that as a weakness of my build or play style or anything like that. That's just okay, I got unlucky and got 3 teammates that can't even stand on their own 2 feet. No build that I can come up with is gonna account for that, you know? But in general, in kind of more or less fair situations, I don't feel like I'm being forced to rethink many of my builds. And also, like, I think just the way that I make my builds tends to thrive in these situations anyway. I tend to go for a lot of mobility, for a lot of sustain, a lot of that kind of stuff. And I think those are good kinds of builds to have, especially in like an 8v8 where you're likely to be outnumbered. You're going to need that movement. You're going to need that sustain to stay on the move. I also have a few builds that are very like AoE focused, like my Necromancer, my Arcanist, my melee Templar, a few others. Even my Sorcerer is pretty AoE focused these days. And again, in 8v8s, AoE builds tend to thrive. And even in 4v4s, they do pretty good because people aren't scattering out as much when there's just two other teams. Like teams are really huddling up together a lot more than what we've seen in the past. So kind of AoE focused builds seem to work pretty well. But yeah, I think some time needs to pass. I think we need some of these veteran players to come back, or we need some of these new players to kind of get good, and start challenging us and start forcing us to rethink these builds. Because right now, it's just for the most part, my same old builds are still getting the results. Or really even better results than ever before. Honestly, that's where I'm at with it. But thanks for writing, John. Good to hear from you, man. Scrollingpodcast@gmail.com once again is the email address. And if you'd like to support the show, really the main thing you can do is just spread the word. If you know of someone that might enjoy the show, just send them over to scrollingpodcast.com. It has all the different links and everything that they might want to know about the show. So once again, that is scrollingpodcast.com. And I think we're going to call the show right there. Thank you all very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.